As a sliver of moonlight in an 1889 Saint-Rémy midnight slanted across the coarse, whitewashed walls of the St. Paul Asylum, the air was steeped in the faint scent of turpentine and the fragrance of withered weeds. Within a bedroom divided by iron bars, furnished so sparsely it resembled a monk's cell, a man with thinning red hair and eyes as searing as fixed stars sat quietly, opening his empty hands. He was not battling the clamorous hallucinations in his mind. Instead, upon a piece of crumpled sketchbook, he tenderly traced with his fingertips the cypress tree outside, a black flame flickering against the night. He was Vincent van Gogh, a man deemed a synonym for madness by posterity, yet at this singular moment, soberer than any other. This is a chronicle of how restraint bursts with power, and how despair transforms into nobility. The genesis of Vincent van Gogh's life held none of the typical painter's romance. Instead, it was a desolate foundation woven from deep black soil and rigorous biblical codes within a quiet parsonage in Groot-Zundert, in the southern Netherlands. As a youth pathologically sensitive to light and shadow, he inherited a microcosm that was ruthlessly cold, obsessed with moral self-restraint and order. In those days, the North Sea winds swept through grey-brown mud houses, and in garrets reddened by candlelight, he learned to use his gaze to capture the textures of destiny etched onto the backs of impoverished miners. He eschewed the career of a polished salesman in an art firm, turning instead to the sunless shafts of the Borinage mining district in Belgium. He understood that true prosperity was not built through a mere heap of colors, but through a sacred logic grown naturally from an ultimate respect for the suffering of all things. If his early missionary work was a baptism of the soul, then the conception of the Studio of the South in 1888 was the practical crucible that pushed Vincent's aesthetics of color to its absolute zenith. Within the yellow house in Alls, listening to the howling of the Mistral wind, he built an isolated island in his mind called the artistic community. A place where prejudice did not exist, only the vibrant collision of golden hues. He was not merely painting, it was a desperate counterattack of the soul against a ruthless reality. In those quiet afternoons where only the friction of a brush against coarse canvas could be heard, he issued silent commands that changed visual history through the ruthlessly precise capture of sunlight and shadow. In that moment, Vincent was the most solitary and steady artisan in all of Europe, standing like a marble bell tower, solitary yet indestructible. The summit of power in the eyes of the wise is often manifested as the penetration of truth. Vincent gradually realized that by voluntarily entering the St. Paul Asylum in Saint-Rémy, he gained not mere stability, but a void born of seeing through the rise and fall of empires. In a hospital room smelling of damp mildew and barred with iron, he discovered that those grand creative ambitions, once seemingly invincible, possessed a profound fragility in the face of the silence after children fell asleep. He wrote to his brother Theo, "I used to think I was writing history, now I find I am merely searching for a point of convergence within the scarred fissures of marble, where the soul no longer falls." This expansive clarity, born of seeing through material vanity, became the hardest armor of his final years, allowing him to face the riddle of death with equanimity. The final season of Vincent van Gogh was spent in a state of profound solemnity and a silence illuminated by the radiance of a sage. At the dawn of July 1890, the fine rain in Auvers fell soundlessly, washing the paths through the wheat fields into a luminous, somber yellow. By then, his body had become remarkably light from days of labor and psychological weight, his once heavy canvas jacket hanging loosely upon a fragile frame. He understood that his sunflower era was drawing to a close along with his slowing breath, and he, the guardian of the starry sky, would soon be buried in the dust of history. In his final conscious moments, he asked to be carried to the window to look upon the grey mists lingering over the Oise one last time. Mists that resembled a painter's primer. He closed his eyes and, with those hands that had touched 10,000 colors and 10,000 sorrows, traced a final arc of completion across his chest. In that moment, the bells of the Parisian balls did not ring, the northern wind carried away the great genius's last sigh. He left behind no grand family estate, but only a searing visual wisdom that remains vital a century later, the weightiest fragments of a dream ever left to the world. Even today, more than a century after his passing, Vincent's name remains the sole sanctuary for many a restless seeker in the dead of night. What he left behind was not a triumphal column piercing the heavens, but a spiritual template of self-restraint and the vigil of civilization. He teaches us that even if the entire world besieges you with clamor, even if your era is destined to collapse, the order within your heart is governed solely by your own perception of truth. He was one of those rare figures in history who truly mastered the art of bridging common sense and prejudice, maintaining absolute lucidity amidst absolute shadows, and absolute logic amidst absolute temptation. Beside the cemetery in Auvers, its edges smoothed by time, he remains in that posture of contemplation, seemingly still soothing this increasingly anxious world. Vincent's quiet vigil for color lives on in every soul that yearns for reality and the unknown. The saga of Vincent van Gogh thus draws to a slow close amidst the fading dusk of southern France. He was never an opportunist who bartered his art for fame, he was merely a weary soul who steadfastly refused to compromise with mediocrity. He reminds us that no matter how mundane or fragmented your life may be, inner tranquility is your only true and eternal refuge. Just as he sat through the coldest winter nights in Saint-Rémy, clutching a guttering candle to find a fulcrum for existence within the void through the tip of his pen. Believe that every life has its own yellow house, a private space for dialogue with a self that requires no outward explanation. May the serenity and vastness of Vincent become the softest feather in your dreams, carrying you toward that most peaceful shore of the inner soul. Good night, and may your dreams be fair.